It is World Rhino Day, and while Africa's black rhino population has been rising over the years, the species remains endangered as poaching and demand for their horns persist. Between 2012 and 2018, the black rhino population grew at an annual rate of 2.5%, an increase of nearly 800 rhinos in the wild. Conservationists are warning that rhinos remain under threat, though, and there will be a decrease in the growth rate of the rhino population over the next 5 years. This, according to population models. Let's bring you some perspective on this. We're now joined by Kadukiwe Sabonia, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Wildlife Foundation. He joins us via Skype. Kadu, many countries across the globe have strict laws to protect the rhino, and yet black rhino populations are still under threat. What is the missing link here?
The missing link is really the demand. We've seen that demand of rhino horn products is the biggest problem of all. And so long as the market exists, then the increasing demand will be met. This sets a persistent threat to poaching. But also there are other issues. There are limited secure and suitable habitat, the rhinos. Most habitats are parks that are huge and require huge investments in law enforcement and their management. Some of the parks are larger than some countries in Europe. That's why we invest in supporting creation of rhino sanctuaries that are within the parks with the special protection and management. The third issue I'll mention is high protection costs. In many cases, poachers are more equipped than the rangers that protect wildlife. It's a huge cost to governments to match the level of investments required to fend off the bad guys. And lastly, sometimes it's inadequate support policies, legislative and strategic frameworks that governments both depend on to the supply countries and the demand countries. Just an example, we saw what happened when China changed its policy and banned ivory trade. It decreased the price and the demand by almost 70%. And when we've seen where we work, where African governments implement better policies and laws, there is a decline in poaching in many of these areas.
And so, Kadu, what do you think then should be the priority areas of focus for African countries, conservationists and scientists if we are ever to return the black rhino population to acceptable numbers across Africa?
It's imperative that the governments and non-government organizations that work with the governments and other environmental groups collaborate to conserve African rhinos. Not only collaborating among ourselves, we need to grow the tent to include other people, whether the economists, the business planners, rural development planners, social development colleagues, to come and help us develop better strategies. As COVID has shown us, this is not only a conservation challenge, it's also an economic challenge. We need to strengthen protected area networks. We need to eradicate the illegal trade of rhinos by increasing our law enforcement, increasing the monitoring of our outlets, ports and airports, collaboration through international legal frameworks to deal with the demand countries of our wildlife. But of course, we need to crack down on the poaching that is mostly found in our communities, not because they want, but because of their levels of poverty that we need to address through our economic development plans.
And of course, this year's World Rhino Day comes right in the middle of a global pandemic when tourist revenues are extremely low. Kadu, how has this affected funding for conservation and awareness programs as well as research?
The impact of COVID has been significant, with over 24 million people in Africa directly and indirectly losing their incomes and sources of livelihoods. Majority of our national parks where these rhinos are found are funded to a tune of over 50% of their revenue from tourism. Some of the rhinos, especially black rhinos, are found in sanctuaries that are 100% funded by the tourism industry. So, and the loss of employment, and this includes frontline rangers, the scouts, community leaders, and tourism entrepreneurs who have been supporting a lot of our law enforcement and protected area management. But through strategic and targeted support, we can see the turnaround. And actually, COVID has had some positive elements to it. They've shown us that tourism is a big part of our healthy programs because they fund a lot of conservation. And it has taught us that conservation is not only about wildlife, but about our existence as a people. But also, the most important, COVID has shown us that the world is flat. A spike in China has shut down Nairobi, Lagos, Joburg. So the world is flat, and we need to do this with a global effort.
Thank you so much, Kadukiwe Sebonia, the Chief Executive Officer for the Africa Wildlife Foundation, joining us there via Skype.